I never thought I'd become the kind of person who hides cameras in their own home. But when your 10-year-old neighbor tells you something impossible, you start questioning everything you thought you knew about your life. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late June when everything changed. I just pulled into my driveway after a long day debugging code at the office. Austin, Texas, heat hit me like a wall as I stepped out of my car. That's when I saw him, little Tommy Chen from 3 doors down, riding his bike in circles on the sidewalk. "Hey, Mr. Marcus," he called out, that gap-toothed grin of his flashing in the sunlight. "Hey, buddy, staying cool?" I waved back, already fishing for my house keys. "Yeah. Hey, is that your cleaning lady? The one who was here yesterday?" I stopped mid-step. "What cleaning lady?" Tommy skidded to a halt, his sneakers scraping against the concrete. "The lady who left your house around 3 o'clock yesterday. She had, like, 2 big trash bags. I thought maybe she cleans your place or something." My stomach dropped. "Tommy, I don't have a cleaning lady." His eyes went wide. "Oh, well, she definitely came out of your house. I saw her lock the door and everything." I forced a smile, not wanting to alarm the kid. "You probably saw her at someone else's house, buddy. Easy to mix up these townhouses." But Tommy shook his head firmly. "Nope, it was definitely your door. The one with the blue mat. I was sitting right there." He pointed to his front steps. After Tommy rode off, I stood there in my driveway, keys dangling from my hand, staring at my own front door like it was a stranger's. The blue welcome mat my mom had given me last Christmas sat there innocently. Everything looked normal. Completely, perfectly normal. Except it wasn't. I unlocked the door slowly, half expecting someone to jump out. The living room was empty, quiet. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles floating lazily through the air. Nothing seemed out of place. My laptop sat on the coffee table where I'd left it. The dishes from this morning's breakfast were still in the sink. The throw pillows on my couch were arranged exactly how I'd left them, slightly askew because I'd never been good at the whole making things look nice thing, especially after the divorce. I walked through each room, checking closets, looking under beds like a paranoid fool. Nothing. Nobody. Maybe Tommy really had been mistaken. Kids see things, mix things up. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that. But then I opened the trash can in the kitchen. It was empty, completely empty. And I distinctly remembered it being half full this morning with coffee grounds and takeout containers. I'd made a mental note to take it out tonight. Someone had taken out my trash. Someone had been in my house. My hands started shaking as I checked the doors, the windows. Everything was locked. No signs of forced entry, which meant whoever came in had a key. But who? I'd changed the locks 6 months ago, right after the divorce from Sarah was finalized. Fresh start and all that. The only people with keys were me and, well, just me. I called my property manager, Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her 60s who'd rented me this place 2 years ago. "Hi, Marcus. What can I do for you?" "Mrs. Patterson, has anyone from your office been by my place recently? For inspections or anything?" "No, dear. We always give 24 hours notice before entering. Is everything okay?" Yeah. Just thought I saw someone. My mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. I knew it wasn't. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house settling made me jolt awake. At 2 in the morning, I found myself Googling hidden cameras for home security on my phone, the blue light harsh in the darkness of my bedroom. The next morning, Wednesday, I called in sick to work. First time in 3 years. My boss, Jennifer, sounded concerned. "Marcus, you never call in sick. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "Just a stomach bug. I'll be fine by tomorrow." By 9 a.m., I was at the electronics store on Research Boulevard, dropping $400 on a set of wireless security cameras. Small ones, the kind you could hide in a bookshelf or on top of a cabinet. The sales guy, a college kid with an engineering degree he clearly hadn't used yet, walked me through the app. "Yeah, man, these are solid. Live feed right to your phone. Motion detection, cloud storage, the works. You worried about break-ins?" Something like that. I spent the next 2 hours setting them up. One in the living room, hidden behind a picture frame. One in the kitchen, tucked beside my cookbooks that I never used. One in the hallway, pointing at the front door. And one in my bedroom, positioned on the bookshelf to capture the whole room. The whole thing felt surreal. This was my home, my safe space, the place I'd moved into after my marriage fell apart, where I was supposed to rebuild my life. And now I was turning it into a surveillance site. But I needed to know. I needed to see what Tommy had seen. I left for the office around 11, making a show of backing out of my driveway in case anyone was watching. But instead of heading to work, I drove to the Starbucks 3 blocks away and parked in the back corner of the lot. I pulled up the security app on my phone and settled in to watch. For the first hour, nothing. Just my empty living room, frozen and still. I refreshed the feed obsessively, checking each camera. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I started to feel ridiculous. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the divorce had messed me up more than I thought. Maybe Tommy really had been confused. Then, at 1:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. My heart stopped. I tapped the notification, and the living room feed filled my screen. The front door was opening. Someone was entering my house in broad daylight. A woman stepped inside, and I recognized her immediately. Sarah. My ex-wife was walking into my house with a key, closing the door behind her like she owned the place. She was wearing jeans and a white blouse I'd never seen before, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked around casually, comfortably, like she'd done this 1,000 times. Which, I was starting to realize, she probably had. I watched in frozen horror as she walked into the kitchen, opened my fridge, and pulled out a bottle of water. My water. She unscrewed the cap and took a long drink while checking her phone. Then she called someone. I couldn't hear what she was saying. The cameras I'd bought didn't have audio, but I watched her lips move, watched her laugh at something the person on the other end said. She wandered into the living room, still talking, still drinking my water, still acting like this was completely normal. 5 minutes later, the front door opened again. A man walked in. He was tall, probably 6'2", with sandy blonde hair and wearing khakis and a polo shirt. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a real estate magazine. Because, as it turned out, that's exactly what he was. Sarah greeted him with a kiss, not a peck on the cheek, a real kiss, right there in my living room. I felt sick. They started walking through the house together, and that's when I realized what was happening. Sarah was pointing at things. The man was nodding, taking notes on his phone. He walked over to the window and tested the locks. He opened the closet door and peered inside. She was giving someone a tour of my house. I switched to the bedroom camera. 5 minutes later, they walked in. The man, this stranger, sat on my bed. My bed, he bounced slightly, testing the mattress, and said something that made Sarah laugh. She sat down next to him, and they stayed there for a moment, talking, looking around the room like they were imagining themselves living there. Then he stood up, walked to my closet, and opened it. He started going through my clothes, actually rifling through my shirts like he was shopping at a thrift store. Sarah pulled out her phone and started taking photos. Of my room, of my bed, of my clothes. The man went to my dresser and opened the top drawer. I watched him pick up a framed photo of my parents that I kept there and examine it before setting it back down. They were in my most private space, touching my things, violating every boundary that existed, and acting like it was their right to do so. I had to grip the steering wheel to keep my hands from shaking. They spent another 20 minutes in my house. They went through my bathroom cabinets. The man opened my medicine cabinet and took photos of the contents. They stood in my living room discussing something, Sarah gesturing animatedly while the man typed on his phone. Then, just as casually as they'd entered, they left. Sarah locked the door behind them, and they walked to a silver BMW parked 2 houses down. They stood by the car for another 5 minutes talking before the man got in and drove away. Sarah watched him leave, then got into her own car, a red Honda Civic I didn't recognize, and drove off in the opposite direction. I sat in that Starbucks parking lot for another 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My ex-wife had a key to my house. She'd been coming and going as she pleased. For how long? Days? Weeks? Months? And now she was bringing strangers into my home, showing it off like it was hers to show. I pulled up Google and searched the man's face from the screenshot I'd taken. It took me 15 minutes, but I found him. Derek Hutchinson, real estate agent with Keller Williams. His profile boasted about being a top producer with extensive experience in residential sales. Sarah was showing my house to a real estate agent. But why? The house wasn't hers. We'd never owned property together. This was my rental, in my name only, that I'd moved into after we split. Unless, the thought hit me like ice water, unless she was planning to sell it anyway. I drove home with my mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. When I got inside, I checked everything. Nothing was missing. Nothing was moved. But now that I knew what to look for, I saw the signs everywhere. The coffee pods were a different brand than I usually bought. There were subtle water stains in my bathroom sink. A hand towel was folded differently than I'd left it. She'd been using my house like it was a hotel. I checked the camera's cloud storage, and my stomach turned over. The recordings went back 5 days, to when I'd first installed them. But the pattern was clear. Every weekday around 2 p.m., Sarah showed up, sometimes alone, twice with the real estate agent, once with another man, older, nervous-looking, who turned out to be a mortgage broker based on the business card he'd left on my counter, and I'd found without recognizing what it meant. That night, I called my divorce lawyer, Patricia Thornton. She answered on the third ring. "Marcus, it's been a while. What's going on?" I told her everything. The neighbor kid, the cameras, Sarah, the real estate agent, all of it. There was a long silence on her end. "Marcus, I need you to send me all those video files. Every single one. Don't delete anything. And tomorrow morning, first thing, I want you to call the police and file a report." "For what?" "She's not stealing anything. She's trespassing, breaking and entering. And based on what you're describing, with the real estate agent and mortgage broker, she might be attempting fraud. This is serious." "But how does she have a key?" "I changed the locks." Patricia sighed. "Did Sarah know which locksmith you used?" I thought back. 6 months ago, I'd mentioned it to her during one of our last conversations while dividing assets. She'd asked about the security deposit on the townhouse, and I'd mentioned changing the locks to get it back. "Yeah," I told her. Then she probably called the same locksmith and sweet-talked them into making her a copy. Or she had a copy made before you changed them and kept one. Either way, she has access she shouldn't have. We need to document this and get law enforcement involved now. I spent that night organizing the video files, creating timestamps, writing down everything I could remember. At 3 a.m., I finally fell asleep on the couch, my phone clutched in my hand, the security camera app still open. The next morning, Thursday, I went to the Austin Police Department's downtown station. The officer who took my report was a woman in her 40s named Officer Rodriguez. She listened to my story with a neutral expression, making notes on her computer. "Do you have the video evidence?" I showed her everything on my phone. She watched in silence, her jaw tightening with each clip. "Mr. Chen, this is definitely trespassing, at minimum. The fact that she's bringing others into your residence without your knowledge or consent is concerning. The real estate angle suggests possible intent to commit fraud, though we'd need to investigate further to determine exactly what she's planning. What do I do? First, we'll file this report. I'm going to have a detective follow up with you. In the meantime, change your locks again. Use a different locksmith this time, and don't tell anyone which one. Consider getting a deadbolt that requires a key from both sides, and keep those cameras running." "Should I confront her?" Officer Rodriguez shook her head firmly. "No. Let us handle this. If she's planning something illegal, we don't want to tip her off before we have all the evidence we need." I left the station feeling both validated and more anxious than before. This was real. This was happening. My ex-wife was committing crimes against me, and I still didn't fully understand why. That afternoon, I got my answer. I was back at work, trying to focus on debugging a particularly nasty piece of code, when my phone buzzed. Motion alert. I pulled up the app, and there was Sarah again, right on schedule. But this time, she wasn't alone. She'd brought 3 people. The real estate agent, Derek, a middle-aged couple in business casual attire, and they were doing a full walkthrough. I called Patricia immediately. "She's there right now with what looks like potential buyers." "Are you recording?" "Yes. Everything." "Good. Keep recording. I'm calling the police." I watched the whole thing unfold in real time. Derek, the real estate agent, was pointing out features of the house. The couple was nodding, smiling, asking questions I couldn't hear. Sarah was playing the gracious host, opening cabinets, showing off the closet space, demonstrating the shower pressure in the bathroom. My bathroom, my shower, my home. The couple spent 45 minutes there. At one point, they all sat down in my living room, and Derek pulled out some paperwork. He was writing things down. The couple was looking at documents. Sarah was signing something. They were making an offer on my house that she didn't own. 20 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up outside. I watched on my phone as Officer Rodriguez and another officer approached my front door and knocked. The look on Sarah's face when she opened the door and saw the police was something I'll never forget. Even through the grainy security footage, I could see the color drain from her face. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw Derek come to the door, confused. The couple appeared behind him, looking alarmed. Officer Rodriguez was talking, gesturing. Sarah was shaking her head, trying to explain something. Then I saw Officer Rodriguez point directly at the camera I'd hidden in the bookshelf. Sarah's eyes followed her finger, and when she spotted it, her whole body seemed to deflate. They'd been caught, on camera, in the act. The couple left quickly, practically running to their car. Derek stayed, arguing with the officers, his hands moving animatedly. Sarah just stood there, silent, staring at the camera like it was a snake about to strike. 15 minutes later, both Sarah and Derek were in handcuffs, being led to separate police cars. I sat in my cubicle at work, surrounded by colleagues who had no idea what was happening, and watched my ex-wife get arrested for trespassing and attempted fraud in my own home. My phone rang. Patricia, Marcus, the police got them. They found documents on the real estate agent showing he was in the process of listing your property. Sarah had forged your signature on a power of attorney, giving her the right to sell. They were going to close the sale, take the money, and disappear before you even knew what happened. I couldn't speak. The scope of it, the calculation, the sheer audacity of what she'd planned. How long? I finally asked. How long was she planning this? Based on what the police are finding, at least 3 months. She's been casing your house, documenting everything, building a portfolio. She had fake tax documents, forged mortgage papers, the works. If that couple had made an offer and it had gone through, you would have come home one day to find your landlord saying the property had been sold out from under your lease. It's actually brilliant in a terrifying way. But why? We divorced over a year ago. Why now? Patricia's voice was gentle. Money, Marcus. It's almost always about money. Your credit is good. Your rental history is solid. Your landlord was planning to sell this place next year anyway. Sarah probably found that out somehow. She saw an opportunity to make a quick $100,000 by selling a property she didn't own to buyers who thought it was a legitimate sale. What happens now? Now you let the justice system work. The evidence you collected is solid. The police caught them in the act. Sarah's looking at criminal trespassing, breaking and entering, fraud, forgery, and a few other charges. The real estate agent is facing even worse since he should have verified ownership. They're both going to face serious consequences. Over the next few weeks, the story unfolded like a crime drama. Sarah had met Derek 3 months earlier at a coffee shop. They'd started dating, and at some point, she'd told him about her investment property that she wanted to sell. She'd convinced him she was the owner, showed him forged documents, and he'd believed her. Or maybe he'd wanted to believe her because of the commission he'd make. They'd been planning the whole scheme together. Sarah would use the key she'd had copied to access the house, make it look lived in and well-maintained, and Derek would find a buyer. They'd close the sale quickly, pocket the money, and be gone before anyone realized what happened. The older man Tommy had seen turned out to be a notary public who'd verified Sarah's forged signatures, thinking he was just helping with a standard real estate transaction. It all came crashing down because a 10-year-old kid noticed a woman leaving a house with trash bags. The court case took 4 months. Patricia represented me in the civil suit while the criminal prosecutors handled the fraud charges. I sat in that courtroom and watched Sarah try to explain herself to a judge who was having none of it. "Miss Thompson," the judge said, her voice sharp as glass, "you violated your ex-husband's privacy, trespassed in his home repeatedly, brought strangers into his residence without his knowledge or consent, and attempted to defraud potential homebuyers out of substantial sums of money. What you did wasn't just illegal. It was a profound violation of trust and basic human decency." Sarah got 3 years in prison, though with good behavior she'd likely serve 18 months. Derek lost his real estate license permanently and got 2 years, The mortgage broker faced fines and probation for his part in the document fraud. I was awarded damages in the civil suit, though I doubt I'll ever see most of that money. But that wasn't really the point anymore. The point was that my home was mine again. I changed the locks that same day I got back from court, using a locksmith 3 towns over that I found through a random internet search. I added a deadbolt that requires a key from both inside and outside. I kept the security cameras up, though now they're more for peace of mind than active surveillance. I also started therapy. Turns out, having your ex-wife secretly invade your home for months does a number on your sense of security and trust. Dr. Williams, my therapist, helped me understand that what Sarah did wasn't a reflection of my failure to protect myself. It was a reflection of her willingness to cross every moral and legal line for money. 6 months after the arrest, I was finally starting to feel normal again. I could come home without checking every corner. I could sleep without jolting awake at every sound. I even started dating again, though I was upfront about my trust issues from the start. One evening in January, I was taking out the trash, the task that had first tipped me off that something was wrong, when I saw Tommy riding his bike down the street. He was bigger now, had lost another tooth, was wearing a new winter jacket. "Hey, Mr. Marcus." "Hey, Tommy. Staying warm?" He skidded to a stop. "Yeah. Hey, did they catch that lady? The one who was going into your house?" I smiled. "They did, buddy. Thanks to you." His eyes went wide. "Really? I helped?" "You really did. You saw something that didn't seem right, and you told me about it. That's exactly what you should do." Tommy beamed with pride, then grew serious. "My mom says I should always tell a grown-up if I see something weird, even if I think maybe it's nothing." "Your mom's right. You never know what might be important." He rode off, and I stood there, in the cold January air, holding my trash bag, thinking about everything that had happened because one observant kid had trusted his instincts. Looking back now, I realize how many small signs I'd missed. The coffee pods, the damp shower, the move towels. I'd been so consumed with my own life, my job, my recovery from the divorce, that I hadn't been paying attention to my own space. But I learned some important lessons through all of this, lessons I want to share with anyone who might be reading or listening to this story. First, trust your instincts. When Tommy told me about the woman, my gut said something was wrong. I almost ignored it because it seemed impossible. Don't ignore that feeling. When something feels off, investigate. You're not being paranoid. You're being smart. Second, document everything. Those security cameras saved me. Without video evidence, it would have been my word against Sarah's, and who knows how that would have played out. In today's world, with technology so accessible, there's no excuse not to protect yourself with documentation. Third, act quickly but thoughtfully. I didn't confront Sarah immediately. I gathered evidence first. I contacted my lawyer. I involved the police. I followed the proper channels. If I'd confronted her directly, she might have destroyed evidence or disappeared. Patience and proper procedure matter. Fourth, don't be embarrassed to ask for help. I called my lawyer. I went to the police. I started therapy. There's no shame in admitting you can't handle something alone. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Fifth, change is necessary after violation. I didn't just change my locks once. I changed them again with different locksmiths, added more security, installed better cameras. When someone violates your trust and your space, you have to rebuild your security from the ground up. Don't take shortcuts. And finally, kids notice things adults miss. Tommy saw what I didn't because he was paying attention in a way I wasn't. Listen to children when they tell you something seems wrong. They might be seeing something important. My life is different now. I'm more cautious, more aware, more protective of my space and my privacy. Some might say Sarah made me paranoid. I prefer to think she made me prepared. I eventually moved out of that townhouse, though not because I had to. I wanted a fresh start, somewhere with no memories of violation. I bought a small house on the other side of Austin, one with a good security system already installed, and neighbors I've gotten to know personally. I still keep in touch with Patricia, my lawyer, who handled everything with such professionalism and care. She told me my case was one of the most elaborate fraud schemes she'd seen in domestic situations. Apparently, my story has been used in legal seminars as an example of why documentation matters in civil and criminal cases. Officer Rodriguez reached out a few months after the case closed to check on me. She said she'd been a cop for 15 years and had never seen someone handle a home invasion situation with such calm, methodical planning. I told her that was terror disguised as calm, but she laughed and said it worked either way. The real estate company Derek worked for went through a complete overhaul of their verification processes after the scandal. Now they require multiple forms of ownership documentation, in-person verification, and third-party title searches before listing any property. My case became their cautionary tale. And Sarah? I don't think about her much anymore. Last I heard, she was serving her time at a minimum security facility outside Houston. I don't wish her harm, but I don't wish her well either. She made her choices. She committed crimes. She violated my home and my trust. The consequences were hers to face. What I do think about is how close it came to succeeding. If Tommy hadn't been observant, if I hadn't followed up, if I hadn't installed those cameras, Sarah and Derek would have sold my house, pocketed $100,000, and disappeared before anyone knew what happened. I would have come home to a legal nightmare, probably facing eviction, with my credit destroyed and my landlord suing me for breach of lease. One small detail, noticed by one small person, prevented all of that. So now, when I come home each day to my new house, I take a moment to look around, to notice the details, to appreciate the security I've built, to remember that my space is sacred and worth protecting. I also make a point to wave to my neighbors' kids when they're playing outside, to listen when they talk to me, to take seriously the things they notice, even when they seem small or unlikely, because sometimes the smallest observations lead to the biggest revelations. Sometimes a kid on a bike seeing a stranger with trash bags is the thread that, when pulled, unravels an entire criminal conspiracy. And sometimes the best security system isn't the cameras or the locks or the alarms. It's the community around you, paying attention, looking out for each other, and speaking up when something seems wrong. That's the real lesson here. Not just about protecting your property or catching criminals, but about the importance of awareness, of community, of trusting your instincts, and taking action when something doesn't feel right. My name is Chen. I'm a software engineer in Austin, Texas, and I'm the guy whose ex-wife tried to sell his house out from under him. But I'm also the guy who caught her, stopped her, and came out the other side stronger and wiser for it. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. Pay attention to your life. Notice the small details. Trust your gut. Document everything. Act when necessary. And always, always listen to the 10-year-old on the bike who tells you something doesn't look right, because sometimes that kid just might save you from losing everything.